year respected. Expert level information, entertainment, education. Rev Yearwood got you covered as you hit your destination. Climate rules everything around me. Dream. For those who lost focus, close your eyes and just dream. Open your third eye, now the world is your office. Coolest show you know is the Hip Hop Caucus.
Welcome back to the coolest show. And, recently I have been looking at a very important topic that I wanted to bring here to this conversation. And it really is within the Arctic. There's been so much conversation about the Arctic. We had young people this past year who were obviously up in arms about Willow. We've had so many different things. And one of the things that for me, when I went to Alaska in particular, in the Arctic, was around fisheries and how important that sustains that community. I need to go and get someone that I knew. I need to bring them back. They've been on here on the Cooler Show on the podcast in the past talking about the Arctic, but I needed to go back up there and get my friend, my brother, Chad Brown, to kind of bring us up to speed on what's going on. But Brother Chad, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Rev. It's a pleasure to be part of this conversation. I'm looking forward to taking a little deep dive. I'll do my best. I'm not a scientist, but I'm in that space, though.
Oh, no. We just want to have this conversation. I mean, for folks who don't know, Chad is a board member of the National Wildlife Refuge Association and the Alaska Wilderness League. He's been featured on so many shows, including this one, the coolest show from the BBC and CBS and Good Morning America, Nat Geo. I mean, you name it. Anything with the outside. But what I love Chad is that he also understands my work. He comes from the hip hop community. He's a photographer, a filmmaker. He's an artist himself and has just connected that. And that's done a fantastic job of connecting many people who don't understand anything about the outdoors to the environment. And he's just done a great job of connecting that. So I just really wanted to make sure that today that we want to talk about things that we can't live without, and that's water. And the ways that the health, safety, quality, and protection of our water and waterways are crucial issues of the climate crisis. So we want to hop right into it. So, Chad, I just gave a little bit of your background, but you know how this show goes. Who is Chad Brown?
Wow. Well, just in a nutshell, you said it well, but I think, I'm a conservationist, and, definitely spend a lot of time in the advocacy space around our indigenous communities, the Gwich'in, also the Newt Nation, and I'm also an angler where I have and do still today fish a lot of these wild, beautiful rivers up in the Arctic Circle, chasing many different species. And I'm also a creative as well, as you mentioned, and that tends to walk parallel with everything that I'm doing. And I use my creativity as a tool to now really not just to create just to create, but I try to use it really strategic in my talent to really bring out the issues that are happening up there in really unique storytelling ways. And so that's in a nutshell, Rev.
Yeah.
That's me, man. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And that's, I know he's on the board of with Soul River Inc. And you can check out, I got some videos there from him at soulriverinc.org. You can check that out there. But let's get to it, man. Help us to understand the significance of the Arctic region to this global health and the balance of ecosystems.
I'll do my best, because, the Arctic is such a complex ecosystem, and I am all over the place, and I'll definitely try to illustrate this, but, it's a unique ecosystem, very, very complex in its plant life, its wildlife, and also the mammal life, the fishes, et cetera. It's very, very complex. And there's very interesting. I have come across working with scientists up there that organisms that they would point me out to, and how that affects everything else. Basically, it's the conditions up there are extreme. You have extreme winters, you got extreme summers, and everything that the atmosphere is even different up there. From the quality of air, and just they're just really interesting light patterns that happens throughout the times up there, even if you're up there during the winter time or even during the summertime, the light patterns tends to, play a big role into the food chain down in the Arctic. And it's what's interesting is that, the wee hours when it's like 12 midnight to like 4 a.m., up, that's the time when people go to bed. But up there, it's like things get even much more wilder, and more animal life is just very active. And you see that at those times. And it's really interesting because during the summertime when it's light, it doesn't get dark up there. And so between that 12 a.m. to 4 a.m., you're seeing so much activity. It's phenomenal. It's really a beautiful, interesting sight to watch. Basically, when you're up there around that time. But the fisheries there is really interesting as well, and huge populations of salmon. You got grayling fish happening out through there. You have trout as well that comes through there. Dolly Varden fish. It's an abundance, but there's also this of course, as you are aware of, you have the drilling that is happening, and that's a domino effect, and that affects everything basically, and so you do see some of those changes, and you see in some of the river lines, the patterns basically. I would basically be on the Ivashak River or even the Chandalar River, and my image on that Chandalar River of what I remember and how the bends, how the turn. When I come back a year later, 2 years later, you see how that river has widened itself, even more, which has a lot to do with when you look at the Gwich'in people. They are constantly moving, their villages, et cetera. So it's a lot, and that has a lot to do with the permafrost is breaking up, and and the thawing.
Let's talk about that for a second. Actually, maybe take a step back. I think you said a lot in that statement. And so when I was there, and shout out to the Gwich'in people.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
folks who don't know, actually, who are the Gwich'in people? Actually, let me ask you that. I was going to break it down. You say who are the Gwich'in people and the other indigenous communities up there in the Arctic that you
Wow.
are
Yeah,
around?
the Gwich'in are, the Gwich'in people are the Caribou people. They live along the Brooks Range area. And a good indication you can find on the map is Arctic Village. That's where a bigger population of the Gwich'in people lives, and the Arctic Village sits right on top of the Chandalar River, which is where they get a lot of their food source of fish, from there as well. But they are the Caribou people. They're protectors of the caribou, and their life their life pattern of like biblical is from the creation period, and where they identified the caribou as where life begins, and that's up there going towards an area called the 1002 area that the government called but that's a sacred area for the Gwich'in area, and that's where life begins, is what they call that. And that's where the great migration of the caribou, they birth their babies, etc., and they make their way. And so the Gwich'in people are like the protectors. They're the people, they are the caribou people. And then you have the Inupiat people that are further up 60 miles from Dead Horse. And you can only fly in there but during the months of February to April, you can take the ice roads, and the ice roads will get you to that village. But that village is a really
Hold
close.
on. Take
Yep.
the what? You said the ice. The ice roads. Wait, wait
Yeah,
a
yeah.
wait, wait a wait a minute. Wait a hold up. Wait, hold up, Chad. We ain't taking ice roads. Hold up now, man. The only way to get
Oh
there is by the
man.
ice roads in February.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
wait a
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. That's the only time that during the February, from February to like February, March, and April. That's the like the perfect time when the seawater basically freezes up really, really hard, and that water turns in basically ice, and that becomes an ice road that they would create that will connect from Dead Horse to the a Nubian nation, basically, and the ice is thick enough to where you can drive 18 wheelers on it, regular cars. But it is a very scary type of drive. I have to admit, it's a scary drive, and it only lasts between February to April, and then after that, it thaws away, and you can't just drive there anymore. It's because it's all seawater through there and slush and everything, and so you have to fly into there. But yeah, and the Nubian people, they're the
Oh
whale
man,
people.
listen, I don't know. I mean, I'm game for everything. You know what I mean? I'm game. That's gonna be. I don't. I want to go when we do go. Have to be maybe the middle of March when the ice is thick. We ain't roam through there, and it's close to April. Like, come on, it's still thick, Rev. No, we don't
Yes,
wait to wait the next March, February before we come back here again. Like, crossing those
I
steep.
have to admit, it's when I first did it, I have to say, it's a very weary feeling, and it does keep you on the edge because you're actually driving on ice, and it's a quiet drive, and you have to drive. That's actually a rule, you have to drive. I believe it's like a 35 miles. You got to keep consistent, and
Mm.
if you slow down too quick and everything, there's that physics is that the speed will stop, but it also that energy kind of like connects to that ice and that water underneath. It can create an explosion, at the same
Mm.
time, so we got movement happen. But I've never heard anything bad happen. I'm alive, and yeah. That's how they do it up
Well,
there. But yeah.
well, we gonna add it to. I know you want me to get there to do some of that stuff, so we had to add that to the calendar. Make sure the ice is thick. So, Chad,
Yes,
you
sir.
mentioned fishery, and I know some of my folks may or may not know what that is. What is a fishery actually?
Fisheries are just identified from a scientific term, basically, but it's identifying basically the bodies of water where fish are being populated or are being counted, etc. And it's a little loose term as well because regular anglers, sporting anglers, they'll say, "Oh, that's a nice fishery," and really what that means
Mm.
it's a place where that river and that area is very, very healthy, and there's a lot of populating of fish there. It's alive. It's not a dead river. So people will use that term and say, "Oh, that's a really good fishery. You won't have a problem going after grayling or she fish or salmon, something like that." But yeah.
Mm. Let's get into that a little bit. You mentioned those types of fish. Thank you for that. When I was there, I was really amazed at how much salmon, in particular, as one of the fish, is not
Mm.
just like a fish that people eat or as a part of, it's a fish in the fishery, but it's literally a part of the way of life. Like it's a staple. Like it's obviously salmon goes out to sea, they had to come back, they die. The animals eat the poop from the animals, help fertilize. It's just a
Yeah.
whole thing, right? It's a whole thing. But also from the people who are living there, it's also a spiritual component, right? It's really they respect these fish. It's almost like they are. I mean, it's a sharing of even when they as you're an angler, but as you catch them and do whatever, there's a connection, right? And I don't think people who are in the lower, right, 48 here, understand that as that aspect of this. So talk about like since you've been there, just the changes, kind of like what you've seen has kind of been different, what species are at risk. Just kind of get into that a little bit, because there's no, and this, how people there are trying to, you mentioned the drilling. I think I want to get into that also. Things that are taking this way of life that's been there for thousands of years, how the drilling and how what people are doing from an extractive measure is changing these fisheries, changing the way of life, and actually putting all of us at risk.
Yeah, that's a lot, Rev. I'll do my best. As you're talking about the salmon and the significance, the it's a, the it symbolizes a spiritual journey. The blood of the salmon is the blood of life,
Mm,
and the which that is that's the life of the food that insects live off of. The trees, the plants, the grizzlies, the deer, the wolves. Everything is connected to the salmon. And if you take that one piece out of that process, it changes everything in the whole food line,
mm,
with all the life around it, including the land.
mm,
And so the blood of the salmon is very, very symbolic to the people, to especially indigenous, and they understand that. And it's a major piece of the ecosystem of the land and the wildlife. And so when you have that drilling and you have different things happening and diamond mining and explosions to the ground, it all these things shift as a domino effect in our environment, and it all shifts right down to that salmon population. And if
mm,
you change that salmon population and the way that salmon makes its way, because it makes its way from freshwater to sea, and then from sea back to the fresh, and they go home to drop babies and they die. That's whole cycle right there. If it gets changed in that pattern and where that salmon can't go, then what happens is that it's like if you're killing off populations of salmon and they can't go, it's like killing off populations of race,
mm,
people, wildlife, animals will go distinct. So it's the blood of the salmon cannot be reproduced by any kind of lab or anything. It's the main ingredient that keeps the life going into the land, into the trees, into the wildlife, the insects, everything.
mm,
And so it's a very delicate, you know, fish, and we have to treat it as if it's as a high regard and respect to that fish, and we have to protect that fish. It's very, very important for us to protect that, because when that salmon comes up, that bear knows exactly what time that salmon is coming up.
mm,
Same thing with the deers, same thing with the wolves. Everything, they have their own timing, and so the salmon can't come up river, and that bear understands the time it goes out with its babies to go and eat and get fat before the winter time comes, and that salmons can't come up water, then you got another domino effect to where that bear, that family is going to die. They
mm.
can't get fat over with. Everything is connected to everything. It's a domino effect. I hope I
No, 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 no,
communicate.
no. You did really well. I just wanted to throw a follow up. So what you're saying, I mean, so important is that as go the fisheries, as go the salmon, so does the Arctic. If the salmon goes and the fisheries goes, the Arctic and the life on the Arctic goes as well.
That's correct.
Mm,
100%. That's correct. That salmon plays a vital role in the life of the Arctic, and everything in the Arctic. So that's the salmon carries the code to the life. Basically, they are the symbol of they are a symbol of life. Basically, they're the whole life cycle that they do is a symbol of life and death. And when that salmon is there in those waters, it makes those waters healthy. It makes those trees healthy. It makes the land healthy. It makes the wildlife healthy, the insects healthy, etc. When that salmon is not there, it takes away everything, basically, and you do see a shift. You will see a shift and change in the wildlife. Things will start to change. It's like how we adapt in survival, and which is it could be good or bad. But from this, it'll be bad because we're killing off a life source, basically, and that life source is connected to everything. And you take that away, it's going to shift and change the environment in a negative way. We'll end up probably losing a bear population, or losing a moose population, or losing a wildlife population. Everything is going to shift to the negative, and that's where I believe, and that's where a lot of indigenous believe, and a lot of even biologists also, who are in that conservation space believe. But the salmon is a critical piece to the life of the Arctic.
Wow. This is why we're having this conversation, and why I think it's important for our movement to understand this and understand it from a standpoint of sustainability and conservation. And clearly, the Arctic is meeting a moment where it is meeting profit versus existence. Like that's what you're saying here. That people are literally deciding between the mining and the drilling and the extractive measures to dig out the fossil fuels. Like that is being put up against existence, not only for the humans who've been there, and the caribou and the bears and everything else, but literally just how that whole world operates. So I guess my question then is that what efforts are being made to ensure the sustainability of the Arctic fisheries, and who's leading that from your standpoint?
Well, there's many. Well, the efforts that are being made, it's hard for me to can recite some of those acronyms that they're using, though. But the government is I know for a fact that the state government is stepping in, and there's definitely conversations happening with indigenous folks, and those conversations is from traditional fishing versus larger commercial fishing practices, and how can we find a middle ground to to satisfy both, but at the same time us not putting one person out of work, basically, which is more for the commercial fishing. The downside to commercial fishing is that there's no regulation on what they are bringing in, because they're bringing in everything. If they're going after salmon, they're bringing in all salmon, and here's where it gets a little dicey. It's going after all salmon, but these salmon are wild salmon versus a hatchery fish that's been raised on a fishery facility, basically. And that's what hatchery fishes are, and they just come out and they put those in the water, and that hatchery fish is really up more for the eating and for the catching, etc. But the wild fish is what we want to try to protect as much as possible. But those populations are dwindling down. I don't really have the numbers on that one, but they are definitely dwindling down to the point where we're having more conversations of trying to, what can we do to help save the wild populations? And of course, the indigenous people, they're really, really working hard to try to find some ways of staying existence into their practices of doing what they do for centuries, basically. And those practices are actually lower impact, of course, because it's a smaller approach. It's taking care of their family or their community versus millions and millions of populated fish being netted up into the big sea, basically, and bringing in for bigger harvest, which creates a bigger impact into the environment, into the, and it reduces the life, the life cycle of salmon, and also other fishes like cod and or she fish out there as well, basically.
how are people adapting to the changes in the fish population? I mean, obviously, what you're saying here is because of these things that are happening from the extractive measures, the drilling, fossil fuel industry, all these things that are happening in the Arctic is having an impact. Obviously, people are trying to build dams,
Yeah.
things, that nature. How, I mean, that's going to change the way of life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And um, it's a big change, but where I witness the frustration the most, and this has like because I spend a lot of time with indigenous nations, is that I see the frustration amongst indigenous people, the Wiccan or even some of the Nubit folks, the frustration, and that frustration lies is like they're netting up more fish and we can't fish, or we were told that we can't come back out here and fish because they're barricading this area off for the netting, etc. And then you got this kind of like combat fishing that I do not support,
Mm,
which is using whatever means by any means necessary to come out and catch fish. And what that means to break that down is, you got people it's I hate to go here, but you got people here that will take their gun and shoot in the water to get
mm,
fish. You got people that will throw out little bombs or whatever to kill to get as much fish. So there's very ugly practices happening, and which is not native. It's much more. Caucasian, type of fishing. I had to say that, but
yeah, no, that's what they say.
but you see those bad practices happening. But really the major effect of what hurts a population is the population that's getting hurt the most is indigenous. The
Mm,
indigenous folks are getting hurt the most in the fishery. It's not. You hear many elders will say it's not how it used to be. I was um, talking with the executive director, Bernadette, from the Witch and Steering Committee, like a week ago, and she was complaining about the fishing, and it's like we can't fish. It's not how it used to be, and it's hard for us to fish. And there's these rules coming into play here that are rules that comes much more protecting or supporting other fishing tactics and what the industry is doing, et cetera. But these rules are not put in place to where it actually supports or protect the Native Americans there, and
mm.
so there's a fight that's happening, back and forth. But yeah, but really the populations that are really being affected isn't it because they do live off the land 100%, 100%, and that's and yeah. So there you go.
No, so I want to ask. So then, as folks are listening, my folks listening is probably in the lower 48, and up with you guys there in Alaska and throughout the Arctic. Obviously, people know that Arctic is also an international region. It's not just America. It also is shared
Right.
by Russia, shared by Canada, it's shared by many other countries. So and it's also by nations. To be very clear, the indigenous nations who are there, been there, are nations
Hmm.
too. So they also share
Right.
that land. What can be done about this? Because I think that this is why we want to have this conversation. And we've had so much talk. My hat, if folks are listening, my hat says protect the Arctic. And we at Hip Hop Caucus, many of us have been very firm on that. Um, but what can people do? Because it seems here that people may not understand a fishery. They may not understand what fishing, they just think about, unfortunately, just going to the supermarket and going to the little section and grabbing what they got to grab. They're not like you, Chad. They're not, they're not getting out there. And we definitely ain't doing that. And they definitely ain't doing no combat fishing. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? They definitely ain't shooting in the water and throwing no bombs out
Right.
there to get no fish. So So in that process, as you have just said so great about the need to protect the Arctic fisheries and what it means not only for the people but for the animals and for that land. I guess what's being done politically? What have you heard that's being done from a policy standpoint, for either from in the state or on the federal level? Is anything being done to protect these fisheries?
From my knowledge in the space that I'm in, I think, unfortunately, I can't recall of what's being done. I know there's conversations that are taking place randomly in the space of our fisheries. But unfortunately, due to I would say the major bigger issues like you said earlier at the beginning, like the Willow Project, and then you got the Willow Project that's taken, of course, that's taken precedence of a lot basically still, and then you have the I forgot that the Alaskan Road. I can't think the name of that for nothing. It's been around, but it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
been happening now. It's becoming much more stronger. I know there's a lot of efforts being put towards. I can't think of it. Rev, do you know what I'm talking about?
No, but we can definitely find out. We'll make sure people will put it on the website so people can get it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can't think the name of it. I'm sorry. It's
No, no.
um. I'm sorry. I kind of lost um my train of thoughts on that. I apologize for that.
No, no, no. But we'll make sure let people know about that. And we'll also will link to any kind of policies and any partners that come up. We'll make sure to link on that. That's definitely an important of this. I have a couple more questions for you, and I think one of them actually goes to again. What do you see as the future of Arctic fisheries, considering the ongoing environmental changes and international policies? What's the future?
Wow. Uh,
I mean, real. I mean, keep it. I mean, this is me actually from your hip hop side a little bit. Like, keep it a buck, as we would say. Like, well, what do you see? I mean, you're out there. Like, what's if folks don't do what they gotta do? What happens if folks do what they gotta do? What happens? What's the future?
I think the future is dark, man. To be honest with you, I think I think I have a lot of number one. I definitely feel as far as minorities, African American, Hispanic, we are definitely. I'm seeing and witnessing a rise up of more rising up into the advocacy and taking a stand for our public lands, wildlife, fresh water. I'm seeing much more of that in the next generation, which that gives a lot of hope because we need that. Uh, but at the same time, I see a lot of darkness on the forefront of where we are at right now, and we don't find agreements. We disagree on different topics, and the indigenous are getting the the ass end of things, and they're fighting really hard. There's slow progress, a little bit of slow progress, and but it's not enough. It's not it's hard. They're still fighting for their land, right? And not to even throw names, but you got the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they're the management of land there. And it's interesting because when I'm out there, you have this authority of management that comes in and tells you where you can't. But at the same time, you're standing on Witchin Nation land that the chief has granted you the access, and then it gets overridden by government. So it's just that complicated, and I see what I see in the future is a constant fight. I don't see a win in the future immediately, but I see a constant fight. And when that next generation comes up, the young people when they come up, they're going to be fighting too. They'll be fighting too. It's going to be a wave of new fighters coming forward, but I don't see a win happening even in that future of that next future as well. I think it's just there's a lot of stakeholders that are not willing to let go, and within the stakeholders, there's underlayer intentions that are not being discussed, and some of those intentions are tied to money and gain. Period. That's all it is. There will always be bigger oil companies out there, the ConocoPhillips, et cetera. There will always be that, right? And there will always be those warriors, those fighters, and those are our young people and our voices, and you, me, and we will always be there fighting and fighting. I think the battle is going to be moving. It's not going to end. It's going to be, and it's going to have to be that way in order for us to have as much opportunity as possible to protect our land, our water, our wildlife, and whatever that we can take along this battle, even in that next generation, is what we seize and we support, we hold on to, and we protect as much as we can. And it may be that inch by inch, every generation or something, though. But I definitely see a long marathon of fighting and taking a stand along with the Indigenous brothers and sisters, as we're moving forward. And I believe that's just going to be part of the lifestyle of what we will be growing into and stepping into in the future.
Wow. That was powerful, and we're going to do all we can to help to mitigate the impact of climate change on Arctic marine life. We're going to do it, and we're going to fight. We're going to make it happen, and we're going to make sure and support folks like you, Chad, and individuals and communities to support sustainable fisheries in the Arctic. My last question, really, I just want to talk. We didn't get to this. I know myself. I was in the military. I was in the Air Force. One of our producers, Cross, was in the Navy. And I know that even how you got into this was you were bringing veterans and other people to the Arctic just to see the beauty of it, to deal with PTSD. Talk a little bit about that. Are you still doing that work? And talk a little bit about that if you are.
Yeah, I am still doing that work. We bring youth and veterans into the Arctic. And within that program, basically, it's an outdoor leadership program, and it involves basically, from a youth standpoint, they're youth leaders who has been with the organization for a while, and they earned their seat into the Arctic deployment. We should call it Arctic deployment, and so that's an opportunity for youth to kind of it's like their vision quest that they go on, and they grow into the leadership. They learn how to call shots, how to lead, and then there's this observation of going and observing, because you are on ground zero and you're learning about climate change right there in front of you. You're also getting opportunity where this program goes into the Arctic village, and we basically make base camp for like around 3 to 4 days, and stay in the village and learn in a deeper meaning of the culture of the Gwich'in life. And that ties itself into the storytelling from elders, into learning the arts, into learning the life of the caribou and the importance of the caribou, of how that connects with the Gwich'in people, and so we're learning that. And then we take all of that information for the youth and vets, and we go embark into an expedition journey into the land, connecting to the land. It's a little bit rough, and it's a little bit challenging. And it's supposed to be that way when you're walking the land of the Arctic tundra. It's a hard walk for everybody. It's walking that land is very, very much hard. You got tuskets in the land, which are like bowling balls that you don't see from up above. You don't even see it from photos. But when you walk in the tundra, they're like bowling balls in the land. And so when you're having a 60-pound backpack on and you're trekking through that land, you got to be careful, because these bowling balls you can sprain your ankles and all that kind of stuff. And it's a hard walk and it's a slow walk. But that's a walk that indigenous people have always done for centuries, and so I like to bring the youth and vets into that walk because it put things in perspective and say, you know what, if you was a hunter for your community and you got to feed 200 folks at your village and you're going out and you put down a 300-pound or 400, 500-pound caribou or a muskox, then it's your job to bring that meat back. And so think about this walk. You're only walking with 50 to 60 pounds in your backpack. Imagine trying to haul 300, 400 pounds of meat and keeping that meat from not spoiling and bringing that to the village for your people to be able to eat. To this day, Arctic Village only has 2 hunters. And those 2 hunters are at the prime of their game. And they go out and they hunt. And they bring back, and that's what they do. They bring back caribou, wolves, bear, etc., to their village, and the entire village eats. And so that's kind of like the experience that the veterans and youth they get when they go in and they learn about what's going on, etc. They go out to the tundra, they camp out onto the tundra, they connect with wildlife. Where they're also fishing for fish, and they catch fish. They learn how to skin the fish there, make fire, and again, community, etc. So it's a really, really deep, rich experience of the work through my organization, Soul River Inc. does when pairing youth and veterans. And that veteran role is really just giving a framework of structure to the youth, basically. That veteran's been there and done that. They have the responsibility. They know what it means by being on mission and following through, basically. And so that veteran's there just as a structure support to help build that youth. And they just basically walk and marry with that youth to make sure that youth is gaining and engaging in full speed of what's happening in front of them in their lives in the Arctic Wildlife Refuge.
Oh, man. I love it. Man, I volunteer cross for that. I'm volunteering cross for that.
That's awesome, man.
I'm volunteering cross. Carry that 60-pound backpack through the tundra. I'm walking, go through the ice road. I'm volunteering our producer to go and check it out. Oh, man. My brother, I love you so much. But how can listeners stay connected to you and find you on your websites?
Yeah. No, you can always follow, I got a big presence on Instagram, which is _Chad Brown _. And you can find my organization's Soul River Inc. or even Love is King. That's on there. And but you can always find me right there on Instagram. I'm constantly chiming in a lot. Sometimes it's a personal chime in. Sometimes it's a chime in of me advocating for the things that we're talking about right now. I'm showing, sometimes I do live feeds when I'm up in the Arctic, and I do my best, but I'm always trying to engage with folks as much as possible in all the work I'm doing. So that's probably the best way is to reach me or follow me, etc. is on Instagram. That's where I have a bigger presence though, but yeah.
Oh, man. And that is Chad Brown up there in the Arctic, y'all, fighting for our fisheries and fighting for the Arctic and the way of life. And I am Rev Yearwood, your host of The Coolest Show. My brother Chad, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate it, man. It was good.
Yeah, it's good.